My guest right now, Michael Snyder. We're talking about secret meetings going on as the world financial situation is approaching another series of storms, crises, and a possible monetary implosions in certain currencies, which will slosh into other ones. A lot of times when currencies go bad, South America is the poster child for all of this. When currencies go bad, people jump out of that currency and into something else. So say, for example, look at Venezuela right now in Caracas and other cities of Venezuela. It's a mess right now. But Maduro won't let go. They won't admit that socialism under Chavez didn't work. Therefore, they're going to hold this in a chokehold. Well, what people used to do is as soon as they'd get some money in their local currency, we'll call it a peso for lack of anything else, they would find a black marketeer on the street, convert it into dollars so that it would hold its value in the midst of the inflation that they were experiencing. And then only when they needed to buy things would they transfer it back into the peso, again through the black market, which was usually a different rate than the official rate set by the central bank of the country. And that's the reason is if the official rate were enforced, the economy would implode. And everybody knew it. And so they went with the black market rate, or even dollars would begin circulating as a second currency, because this is a double-edged sword, Michael, and you know this and I know this, and it's a double-edged because, as you say, it would flush an incredible amount of underground money up. At the very same time, it would also allow snooping on regular citizens. And what happens when our banks all go into negative territory and we wind up not only having to use the system to make transactions, we actually keep paying all these fees just to be in the system?
Yeah, a cashless system goes very well with negative interest rates because then we have to have relationships with the bank. We have to deal with the banks, and then they can impose negative interest rates. We're basically paying a fee to just have our money in the bank. But, what concerns me even more in terms of a cashless system is that if you have to participate in the cashless system in order to buy, in order to sell, in order to get a job, in order to have a bank account, in order to basically participate in society, all of a sudden the government can come along and be the gatekeeper, and they can say, okay, well, everything's gone cashless, but in order to participate in the cashless system, you've got to have a proper government-issued identification in order to participate. And so they can set the terms for getting that identification, and potentially even you could be forced to take a loyalty oath at some point or meet other types of conditions in order to participate, and everyone would feel forced to participate because otherwise you couldn't have a job, you couldn't live, you couldn't buy, you couldn't sell. Especially those of us that are familiar with Bible prophecy can kind of see where that is heading down the road. So it potentially sets up the potential for great, great tyranny. And as things fall apart around the world, I believe the elite they like to use times of crisis to transition to things that they fully intended to do anyway. If you want to see kind of what the end game of socialism looks like, you were just talking about Venezuela, where already we're seeing full-blown economic collapse happen down there. One estimate of inflation put it over 700% on a yearly basis, where the currency is basically worthless at this point. If people do actually get some money, they race to the store to try to buy whatever they can before the price goes up tomorrow or the next week or whatever. So there's severe shortages of food, basic supplies, crime and is totally out of control. The mafia is getting control all over the place. But it's basically the complete breakdown of society there in Venezuela.
That is the end game. And we know that the end game of the global elites has been a global governance, as they call it. I call it a global government of a form. We know another crisis is coming, and they use that crisis to jockey you to the solution that they want you to choose. Okay, anything else? Michael Snyder with the Economic Collapse blog. Anything we missed in this?
Well, I think this ties into, you're talking about the elite and how they often use times of turmoil to advance that agenda. And, I believe the next period of economic turmoil, the early chapters have now started. We talked about Venezuela, or you could talk about Brazil, where, just recently CNN ran a headline, and Brazil's the seventh largest economy on the entire planet. CNN ran a headline this was the headline: Brazil, economic collapse worse than feared. So not only is CNN announcing, hey, there's an economic collapse in Brazil, but it's worse than they thought. And we've got the big banks melting down in Europe. We've got Japanese GDP has gone negative again. The Chinese stocks are down more than 40% since the peak of the market, and they're reporting their worst numbers since the last global recession. So all over the world, we're starting to see this. It's a global phenomenon. And then here in the United States, why Barack Obama and the Federal Reserve are so concerned is because we're starting to see things slow down here as well. For the first quarter of 2016, for example, U.S. GDP grew at just a 0.5% annual rate during the first quarter. Now, we have to keep in mind that last year in 2015, they specifically changed the formula for calculating GDP and gave a boost to the first quarter because every year the first quarter was kind of disappointing. So they gave a boost specifically to make the first quarter look better, but even with that boost, we only came in at 0.5%. So without that artificial boost, it's very likely we would have been in negative territory. And in fact, now we've seen for 3 quarters in a row the GDP number has started to decline. So we're seeing this economic slowdown here in the U.S., and of course, we never really had a recovery anyway. In fact, it may be hard to believe, but Barack Obama is poised to become the first president in all of U.S. history to never have a single year during his time in office when the economy grew by more than 3%. And, many presidents were only 4 years. He's had 8 years, and he's never had a single year of 3% or better growth. So we've never really had much of a recovery at all, but now we're starting to see this downturn. In fact, just in April, according to Challenger Grain Christmas, U.S. firms announced 35% more job cuts during April than they did in March. And overall, for the first 4 months of this year, job cut announcements are running 24% higher than they did for the exact same period in 2015. So we're starting to see big companies, big corporations announce job cuts, lay people off. And just in my own extended family, so far this year, 3 people have lost their jobs. We're starting to see this downturn show up in the employment numbers because basically right now businesses are hurting. In fact, this has been going on for quite a while. You don't hear about this much in the mainstream media, but for example, total business sales in the United States have been declining for close to 2 years now, and they are now down about 15% than they were in late 2014. In other words, businesses in the United States are selling 15% less stuff than they were just about 2 years ago. We've seen the inventory to sales ratio spike to the heights we haven't seen since the last Great Recession. In other words, there's lots and lots of stuff sitting in inventory out there that's not being sold, a sign of a very unhealthy economy. We've seen corporate earnings decline now for 4 quarters in a row. An entire year, corporations are earning less money. And profits for companies that are listed on the S&P 500 were down 7.1% during the first quarter than they were compared to the same period a year ago. And so business is slowing down, corporations are making less money, and businesses are going under. In fact, in April, just last month, commercial bankruptcies were up 32% compared to a year ago, and Chapter 11 bankruptcy filings were up 67% compared to a year ago. So we're seeing corporations, their earnings are going down, many of them are failing, and what happens when that happens? They start to lay people off. That's why I mentioned the layoffs that are happening. What all of these numbers are saying is, the stock market went up yesterday. It's down a couple hundred points as we do this program today. So it's going up and down, and people are saying, what's going on with the economy? Well, the economic fundamentals continue to deteriorate. They're all screaming and telling us the early chapters of another great crisis have already started, but sometimes it takes the market a little bit of time to catch up with reality.
Michael Snyder, my guest right now, theeconomiccollapseblog.com. We'll be back. We're at steelonsteel.com. I'm John Lefferts.